What's up, everybody? This is Nick from Tenacity.ai with my co-host Jason, and you're listening to the Cloud Cost Optimization Podcast. Today we're going to talk about reserved instances, standard reserved instances in AWS, and some of the nuances in making decisions there. Some of the things I think can kind of be intimidating. So let's start the topic with, I guess, first, Jason, why don't we, could you define kind of the discount programs that are available through AWS, sort of the four options that are there, and sort of frame them in for the audience?
Yeah, so we have, standard reserved instances. Reserved instances in general have two different types, standard and convertible. Convertible reserved instances essentially just allow you to, change different ability to exchange those particular reserved instances for other types of reserved instances, whereas standard reserved instances, you can only either sell them or keep them throughout the period of the term. And then you have savings plans. Savings plans, either compute-based savings plans or EC2-based savings plans only. The only difference really at a high level being that compute savings plans includes compute used by Lambda and some containerized-based solutions. And then that makes up a majority of where you can save money. There are also some ancillary services within AWS that offer reserved instances, as well as maybe savings plans. I think there's a SageMaker savings plan. And then there's a handful of services like OpenSearch, RDS, Elasticache, and a couple others that offer reserved-based instances. But those are all kind of separate, one-to-one sort of things. They're much easier to understand than the EC2 or compute-based in general plans.
Yeah, and so I think that's kind of frames in the world. There's of course other discount programs that AWS offers, or other credit-based programs that AWS offers. But when you think about commitment-based discounts, which is really where we're focused on, and that's a place where you can really do a lot of optimization. I think it's a little bit confusing, at least when we've been out in the world, both ourselves from kind of acquisition and learning about it, but also when we're, into environments where, we've gotten to do it. We've gotten to understand this hundreds of times over and over and over. But folks who are in their own enterprise, managing their AWS environment, haven't had the number of repetitions to sort of uncover some of the gotchas and to get over some of the sort of, decisions that you end up having to make, that you're kind of blind to some of the impacts. And so I think that creates some confusion and creates a phenomenon that we see where a lot of times folks select a really easy kind of low risk plan, implement it, and just renew it, year after year, not really getting the benefit of the deepest discounts they could, or taking advantage of how some of these plans work. And specifically what I'm talking about is where we've run into issues in standard reserved instances where there's some confusion around instance size flexibility. Some people know that it exists. Other people don't know that it exists. And that I think is a source of almost, I don't know what you would call it, maybe indecision or uncertainty that causes people to move towards savings plans. Which
isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, at the end of the day, saving money is always good. But if you go by the suggestions being made by the providers, you're most likely saving the amount of money that they want you to save and not the amount that you can actually save. And that's because, one, it's really confusing. All of them in general. Why should I have this one versus this one? Which workload should have this? So when you start to look at the decision tree for just whether you should use reserved instances versus savings plans, I mean, there's a handful of decisions that make it really easy. Like if you're only using Lambda and Fargate, right, then I should be on a compute savings plan. Very easy. But 65 or 70% of AWS's revenue comes from EC2. So that's where you can save a majority of your money. And, once you get into trying to figure out what's best for these types of workloads and ones that work on these days, there's just a litany of different decisions that you have to make. And so savings plans, when they came in, they were pretty successful because it made you commit based on spend. You don't have to worry about usage. There's just less decisions that you need to make, but your better bang for your buck is to, one, have a strategy for both, right? Depending on the workloads that you have, commit and usage based spend. And there's so much context that's missing from the recommendations that the providers give you, right? I mean, they only give you simple calculations and look back periods to say, okay, and things like if I had, if I do the look back period at 60 days versus 7 days, and let's say I shut down half of my EC2 instances 30 days ago, it's still going to recommend a bunch of compute from 60 days ago that I no longer have. But again, that's not the tool. It's meant to give you an estimation, and it's meant to give you basically the lowest risk recommendations that AWS will give you. And you can just achieve far greater savings by, one, adding context to an algorithm, but two, just recognizing that it takes too much time to gain this expertise when your time at your organization is far better spent servicing your customer and getting a company to help you with it.
Yeah, I think you hit on a good point there. The recommendations that the providers make, or specifically the AWS makes, we had a recent issue with this where AWS was making a recommendation on the 60-day look-back period that would have caused someone who followed that recommendation to have bought or to have acquired a bunch of standard reserved instances for which they would have no use whatsoever. And it would have ended up costing them more. Yeah, it would have ended up costing them more at a run rate level than what they were currently spending on their on-demand charges. And so you have to be careful in looking at AWS's recommendations over a longer look-back period, because the algorithm there that's helping make those recommendations does not weight what you're currently using at a much higher weight, or at a much higher relevance than what was happening 60 days ago. And that's really how a recommendation algorithm needs to work. It's in fact how the Tenacity algorithm works. Is it looks contextually at what you're doing right now versus a look back to try and understand variance and to inform you about potential risk, so that if you're most recently using a bunch of stuff that you weren't using 60 days ago, it's going to tell you about that. So that's one of the issues there. I think the other issue that gets people is this instance size flexibility. You can buy standard reserved instances and plans and use them within the same family for different sizes. So, for instance, I could go buy T2 medium reserved instance plan, and I could actually stop running my T2 medium EC2 instance and start running two EC2 T2 smalls, and that plan would cover them. And this is, I think, confusing to folks, that there is this normalization factor that's hidden. You can go find it in the AWS knowledge base, but it's not evident inside of buying a plan or really understanding a plan. But there is this normalization that allows you to be flexible in using standard reserved instances. However, there's a catch. It only works for Linux, Unix-based EC2 instances, and there's even some exclusions there. Doesn't work for Windows, doesn't work for Red Hat Enterprise, doesn't work for SUSE Enterprise. And so, and there's a number of other exclusions. I haven't given the whole list of exclusions, but broadly or generally, people get hung up here where they may be running workloads that don't meet the conditions for instance size flexibility and then mess up and purchase the wrong reserve.
Committed to the wrong thing. I mean, if you want to maximize savings, it's almost impossible with just the recommendations that they give you. And the other thing, I say this a lot to different people, is that why would you want to trust the entity charging you to tell you how much you can save on how much revenue they're generating from you. Just to me, it doesn't make much sense. I mean, it's great that they do it and they do allow you to save a little bit of money. That's great. I got no problems with the plans themselves, but they're going to make the recommendations that are more favored in their side of the win, right? Because they have stock shareholders, they have demands to meet, right? And so they need to give you enough to keep you in, but you can save far more by doing some of the things we just said.
Yeah, definitely. Agreed. I think that probably covers off on the topic we want to touch on here, which is really, I'm trying to understand the recommendations around AWS. We'll talk more on this topic and how you actually get to a recommendation, how you can get to a human contextual recommendation. And there are a lot of tools out there that help you make decisions automatically, allow you to put it on autopilot. And those can get you some really good benefits in that they can, buy and sell and convert these plans very quickly. But there's also, it misses a human contextual element that, you can make some risk-based decisions that allow you to get some of the deepest discounts available on, areas in your environment you feel are actually pretty safe to go make those purchases. And what plays into that is this instance size flexibility, because if you're going to be in the T2 family or the T3A family or M5 family for a long period of time due to the workloads you're running, you can actually optimize and maximize some savings, even though that family may change over time. It's probably not going to change in the time span, or at least the changes won't be relevant from a cost perspective in the time frame in which you can gain that advantage. So, it's worth actually thinking about and understanding that instance size flexibility and the impact on those recommendations. Any parting thoughts, Jason? All right. Well, that's it for today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.